All right. Welcome, everybody. I think we're going to have a slightly smaller crew here today because I'm going to need to send the email out that I normally send before the call, after the call. Just some stuff with the first of the month and way too many calls today. So, at any rate, hope you've all been weathering the weather okay. I think we've got over 2 feet of snow on the ground here. Lee, you probably have more than that up there in Laconia. And I think maybe on the next call, we'll be talking about the ice runway, right? It looks like,
I think that will be open, Greg. Yeah, we probably got a foot and a half of snow up here.
yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, it's close. I watched the Facebook page and it looks like any day now.
Yeah, they're talking about tomorrow, actually.
Fantastic. Of course, so not my plane is in North Carolina for avionics work. So if I fly in, it'll be in a friend's plane
Yeah.
or something. But it's always fun just to go up and watch everybody else do it, right? Okay, so just pointing out that it looks like the second was pretty strong here, right? And that we're trending 4.6% or 4.06% above last year on a month to date number. Now that will probably trend off a little bit as we get closer to the end of the month. We'll see how it all winds up because things do tend to slow down after the holiday, but it's a good start off to the year. And then this is just the same data we now are showing. We're still keeping 2019 in here as this reference year. Although maybe next year we'll just move that over to 2020. We'll see. But I decided we would just so now we're tracking really 7 years worth of data in there. And then here's part 91. And you can see that followed the same pattern, generally speaking, but an even greater bump year over year. So we're up 9.3% compared to the same period last year. And then when we look at part 91 versus prior years, still until we get like further into the year, this chart, I mean, you can just see that we're roughly halfway through the month and roughly halfway up the chart. So it's going to be a little, fairly in line with last year, but hopefully a little better. And then here's the combined chart, same deal. We're up 10.27% when we compare the two. And then when we get into size classes, we're up for light jets. So that's a good way to start the year, up 2.1%. We're up 3% for mid-sized jets. We're up 9.5% for super mids. I was just talking to somebody. I was on the road and in person with somebody yesterday who was just extolling the virtues or how well the Challenger 300 and 350 do in the charter market. And now that those aircraft are getting older to the point where you see more and more of them in charter, it's really kind of remarkable. Also, the Praetors, while they're not as prevalent yet because they haven't been built for as many years, are also super popular, and the super mid-size category is just where it's at in terms of charter. This isn't new for 2026. We saw it all through 2025 and really for a while now. That's where it is because the aircraft fits almost every mission. It doesn't feel like it's too big for some of the shorter legs. It'll do transcons for a heck of a lot less than you can do that in a Gulfstream. So that's just kind of where it's at. Now, here is the large cabin numbers. We're up 2% year to date there. And then here are the turboprop numbers. We're up 4.7%. So every single size class that we track is positive for the first 2 weeks of the month. So that's nice to see. Then when we look at our major metro airports, well, LAX, this is including all the airlines, off a tad. When we just pull out the GA, it's up 12.6%. A huge part of that is because of what's going on with all the construction in Van Nuys. So you'll see it too in the OD pair chart. Van Nuys does not make the chart at all, but Burbank does. So a lot of the heavy metal that's normally at Van Nuys has moved to Burbank while they're doing that work. Here is LaGuardia going back to the East Coast, and we're up 3.4% for the year to date there. This is just an airline reference. And then we look at Teterboro up 11.7%. So that's super strong start to the year for the key airport in the New York Metro. 6.8% bump for White Plains. So as you can see, like all the numbers, I mean, we're going to see a few places here where there's a negative number, but the trend predominantly across the board is positive for the first 2 weeks of the month. And keep in mind, that turns around from where we were the same time in December. So December ended slightly off from last year. It was a little bit softer, but January is kind of off with a bang. And part of that is the holiday and the way that it fell, in terms of the day of the week and whatnot. But part of it too, I think, is that you got people that are back on the road traveling for business, and business has been stronger than leisure for a while now. So anyway, year to date, we're up 7.9% in Farmingdale and then up 2.2% for Morristown. So the entire New York metro market, or at least the airports we track there, are all in positive territory, with Teterboro being on top. Here is Midway when we look at airline traffic. When we pull the airlines out and just look at GA, it flips that from minus to positive, and we're up 3%. We're also up when we look at the suburbs of Chicago and Milwaukee, up 1.4%. Here is Atlanta, and this is Hartsfield. It's up. There was an event last year that caused Atlanta to be down. So this throws those numbers off a little bit. And when you look at the GA, just interesting to note how last year, when the airlines had a big issue, the private aviation traffic into Atlanta spiked. And then here we just don't have that event, and we're off 8.9%. Due more to the lack of that event than any other factor. And then here is Peachtree, DeKalb, up 21.7%. So nice bump to the business aviation activity happening out of there. Here is Boston. This is Boston Logan. All traffic, including the airlines. And then here it is when we pull the airlines out, still up 3.4%. Or I'm sorry, 3.5%. Here is suburban airport for the Metro Boston market, which is Bedford, and that was up 11.8%. So an awful lot of activity coming out of there. Here's Reagan, another sort of barometer airport, more airline traffic, not a lot of GA, but it's still nice to see where that's at. And it was up 9.8% for the first 2 weeks. And then here's Dulles, where we look at all traffic, up 7.6%. Pull out the airlines, and we're up 9.2%. So lots of additional growth there. And this airport's already up significantly year over year. If we looked at 2024, we would see that it was up significantly there as well. Here is Manassas, up 36.6%, which is pretty crazy. I mean, that's a huge bump for any airport, and it's hundreds of flights over those couple weeks. Granted, we're not in the 400 or 500 flight a day range that you see in Teterboro, but as a growth percentage, it's up materially. Here is Charlotte, off slightly from an airline schedule perspective, but up 3.1% when we look at it just purely for GA. And just to qualify, our GA does not include Cessna 172s and trainers and things like that. These are business aviation aircraft types that we filter for. So then going to second home cities, here is West Hampton in New York. Its chart is below our recap. Its numbers are behind the recap here. We can see it's off slightly, but we're in the off season. There's single digit flights in there. I wouldn't pay too much attention to that percentage trend. Here's Aspen, including the airlines, which is off a bit. And then here it is off a bit more. There have been weather issues in Colorado this season, so that's having an impact on the traffic out there. Here's Vail with the airlines, off 7.6. Here's Vail without the airlines, off 11.2. Similar deal with weather, lack of snow impacting things out there. Here is our Metro Denver GA airport, off 0.9%. And then here is Nantucket, which, despite the fact that it's way off season, there is up 38% relative to the prior year, and that's like over 100 flights over the 2 weeks. So that's a material increase in activity. People go into that island even though it's the middle of winter. Martha's Vineyard, same trend, slightly different, not quite as many additional flights, but still up 16%. So people, and not an awful lot to do out on those islands in the middle of winter, but I guess hunkering down with family must be one of them. Here is Napa, off 13.9%. Abandoned Dunes off 14.2%. So some of these West Coast leisure destinations are off. Scottsdale, on the other hand, is up 12.5%. This is the becoming peak season for Scottsdale, where, I mean, as you can see, looking at this chart, it's going to be fairly steady, if not increasing a bit as we go through the next few months. And then as it gets really hot out there, things tend to taper off over the summer. Here's Jackson Hole. We're getting into their peak season, and you can see they tracked just about the same as last year, only up 1%, but still up. So when you compare that to Aspen and Eagle, I think they're much happier to be where they're at. Not that anybody doesn't want even more growth than that. Here's Hilton Head off 15.7%, so not quite as popular for the first couple weeks of the year. And then here is Dallas. This is in Addison in the Dallas market, up 17%. Dallas Love, including the airlines, is up 6.2%. When we pull out the airlines, we're up even more at 11.6%. So the Dallas market is hopping. And then here is Houston. We're at 15.4%. So nice bump there. I mean, look at that red line and how far it is above the yellow line there. And then here is Opelika. You can see we are up 7.9% for the year to date. So that's a healthy, positive trend for the fastest growing biz ad airport in South Florida. Then here's Fort Lauderdale International, where we're up 5.1%, including the airlines, and up 17.8% when you pull them out. Fort Lauderdale Exec is up 30%. Crazy amount of additional traffic in there over the holidays. So if you were to ask me, I would say this is the other side of the impact of folks not going to Aspen and Eagle. They decided to go south to catch warm weather if they couldn't ski. And then here is Naples, also up 7.2%. Here's West Palm Beach, and you can see West Palm for all traffic is down 18.2%. West Palm for GA down 33%. So some of that South Florida airport traffic, at least on the East Coast, is a result of the redeployment of flights that would have gone into Palm Beach, going into Fort Lauderdale in particular. I'm certain if we pulled up Stewart, we would see the same thing there. There are flights all around West Palm, or airports all around West Palm benefit when the TFRs go into effect. But I also think that for Florida in general, some of the folks that would have gone north to ski also decided to go to their southern house as a result. And then here's Nassau in the Bahamas, up 5.8%. And let's get to our top 50 route charts. Let's get to the most recent one. Whoop. So here it is. And you can see that the white, which is ones we don't have categorized, there aren't as many of those airports in here. We don't categorize sort of Boston market. We don't color it, at least. We don't color LAS, Las Vegas. And we don't color the mountains in Colorado. But what we do color are the places that we really look at. And the green is New York area, New York Metro. The orange is Florida. And you can see there's a heck of a lot of both of those. And then this gray, which is international, is also way up here on the list. An awful lot of people found the islands interesting places to go to. And you can see here that some of this is return traffic, right? For folks that also, just like I was saying for South Florida, chose to go to the islands instead of going to Aspen and Vail. Now let's get to the most recent weekend fuel. Whoa, I went too far, sorry. Here it is. So we're looking at, an awful lot of red out west. So prices went up out there, and in some cases materially. And then back east, we've seen predominantly lower prices with the exception of New Hampshire and Massachusetts, New Jersey. There's a few places on the East Coast where we had some modest increases in price. And then this is what that looks like when we just look at overall fuel prices. So $7.62 for Alaska it's the darkest color, meaning the highest price there. Colorado is also fairly expensive. California is up there right now. Vermont isn't so cheap either. And Rhode Island on the East Coast is definitely always has been expensive. So when we look at Rhode Island, we're at $6.99 on average per gallon, which is up there for Jet A. So that rounds out the charts. I don't know if there's anybody that has any specific questions or anything you'd like me to go back and look at again. I did record this since I haven't sent my email out yet. So now I'll be able to include a link to the recording, and I'm going to try and do better at recording these things for the people that can't always make it when I do it. The next call is going to be, let me just look, because this one was just artificially late because of other travel I had. I followed that pattern of get off the holidays and get on the road. It is going to be, we can do it on the 5th. We'll have enough time between the 1st of February and the 5th to get the deck put together. So we're basically talking about, ironically, we will have calls back-to-back weeks just to get back on track. So there will be a call next Thursday where we'll go over the full month of January. So that's what's going on there. Anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to see again? Let me double check the chat. Looks like we got nothing in there. All right. Well, then if that's it, I know we had a small crew because because of when I sent the email out, but at any rate, we'll see you all next week for a full month of January recap and an update on what's going on in the ice runway, Lee, right? Maybe we both have some pictures. All right. Thanks, everybody. Until next time.
Yeah, that'll be great, Greg. I just had to push the right button.
I hear you. All right. Well, take
All right.
care. We'll
Take
see
care.
you.
See you later.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye-bye.